Picture it, May 2025. The streets of Liverpool are absolutely electric. Thousands of fans are celebrating, and then, out of nowhere, a minivan just plows right through the crowd. Pure chaos. Over 50 people injured. This isn't some scene from a movie. It's a terrifying and growing threat that we really need to get our heads around.
So welcome to The Explainer. Today we are breaking down the hard data behind vehicle ramming attacks. We're going to look at where they happen, what's driving them, and what the research tells us about this weapon of opportunity. All right, so let's start with the core concept. In most developed countries, a car isn't just a way to get from A to B. Think about it. It's probably the most accessible weapon a person can get their hands on. You don't need a special license, you don't need special training to turn a totally everyday object into something incredibly dangerous.
So, what exactly are we talking about here? The definition is pretty straightforward. It's a deliberate assault using a vehicle. The key word there is deliberate. This isn't about traffic accidents or even road rage. This is about someone intentionally using their car to cause harm. And this is not some rare freak occurrence. The latest data shows a huge spike. 27 attacks reported across the globe in just 9 months. That kind of frequency is exactly why we need to dig past the headlines and really understand the numbers behind this.
Okay, so if these attacks are happening this often, where in the world are they concentrated? Well, the global data paints a picture that, I gotta say, might not be what you're expecting.
Now check this out. This is the raw data from the Mineta Transportation Institute. Since 2013, just look at the country at the very top of the list for the sheer number of attacks. You might think it'd be a major conflict zone, right? It's not. It's the United States.
And this chart just makes that point crystal clear. Out of 270 attacks worldwide since 2013, the U.S. leads with 85. That's nearly a third of all incidents. That puts it ahead of regions that we typically associate with long-standing, high-profile conflicts. So where exactly are these attacks taking place? Well, they happen in the most ordinary places, the places that make up our daily lives. Public streets, outside of buildings, and especially at public gatherings. Things like parades, holiday markets, and street festivals. These are what security experts call soft targets. And attacking these soft targets has absolutely devastating consequences. The data shows that when an attacker drives into a public gathering, the result is incredibly lethal. We're talking an average of 4 fatalities per incident. Now compare that to an attack outside a public building. The average number of fatalities just plummets to 0.1. So here's the crucial takeaway. The choice of target, specifically a dense, crowded, and confined space, is what turns a car into a weapon of mass casualty. This brings us to the attacker themselves. What on earth drives someone to do this? In this next section, we're going to untangle that complex web of motivation and risk. The research is pretty clear that there's no single profile. Motivations are often this really messy combination of factors. Some attackers are inspired by terrorist ideology. Many others have documented mental health issues. And then some are driven by very personal grievances, like one case in China involving a man who was angry over his divorce settlement. For investigators, figuring out a clear motive is often the hardest part.
But this brings up a really important question, right? I mean, if vehicles are so easy to get and the potential for carnage is so high, why aren't we seeing even more of these attacks? Well, researchers found this really compelling comparison to the airline hijacking epidemic back in the 60s and 70s. Back then, a hijacker actually had a pretty decent chance of getting away with it, sometimes even getting asylum in another country. But for a vehicle rammer today, the outcome is almost certainly going to be death or capture. Let's put a hard number on that risk. The chance of an attacker being killed during the act is over 27%. That's a staggering number. To put that in perspective, it's comparable to the mortality rate for a British soldier in the trenches of World War I. So this huge personal risk is likely a powerful deterrent that's keeping this horrible tactic from becoming even more common.
All right, let's move into our final section. Because while the global trend is complicated, the data points to a particularly troubling pattern that's emerging right in the United States. The conclusion from the data is, well, it's stark and it's unambiguous. In the U.S., both the number of vehicle ramming attacks and the number of people being killed in them are going up. But there's a really crucial nuance here that we need to understand. The overall increase in the number of attacks is mostly being driven by people with personal issues or mental health struggles. But the increase in the number of deaths, the lethality, is being driven by ideologically motivated or terrorist-inspired attacks. So more attacks are happening for all sorts of reasons, but the deadliest ones are increasingly tied to extremist ideology. And this gets right to the heart of what makes an attack truly catastrophic. The researchers say it plainly. Large vehicles, high speeds, and crowded spaces are the ingredients for mass casualties. It is the exact formula we saw in the horrific attack in Nice in 2016, and in another deadly attack in New Orleans that the report details. And all of this leaves us with a final, really difficult question. The car is a fundamental part of modern life, right? So as it keeps getting turned into a weapon, we're faced with this monumental challenge. How do we protect the open, public spaces that we all cherish without just walling them off and fundamentally changing our way of life? It's the central dilemma in confronting this threat, and it's something we're all going to have to grapple with.